The alarm woke Captain Hyun from his sleep. He jumped out of bed and ran to the bridge of his ship. His crew was already there, staring at their screens with worried faces. Something was very wrong. "What is it?" Hyun asked. Commander Yuna turned to face him. Her dark eyes were filled with concern. "Sir, we're receiving a message from the Vrin Collective. It's marked urgent." Hyun felt his stomach drop. The Vrin were powerful aliens who controlled this part of space. They had 4 different species working together, and their technology was far beyond what humans had. For 20 years, humans had lived peacefully on Aegis Prime, a planet the Vrin had allowed them to settle on. The humans had worked hard, turning the harsh land into farms and cities. "Play it," Hyun said. The screen lit up with the face of High Arbiter Thelvas. The Vrin leader had smooth blue skin and 3 eyes that glowed with a cold light. When he spoke, his voice was flat and emotionless. "Humans of Aegis Prime, you have exceeded your permitted zones. You have taken more land than was agreed. We have decided that your presence is no longer acceptable. You have 72 hours to evacuate the planet. All humans must leave. If you do not comply, we will use force. This is not negotiable." The message ended. The bridge fell silent. Hyun looked at Yuna. "Get me Tae. Now." 10 minutes later, Tae's face appeared on the screen. He was down on the planet's surface in the colony's main settlement. Tae was older than Hyun, with gray hair and a face marked by years of hard living. He had been a soldier on Earth during the resource wars, back when humans fought each other for water and food. Now he led the colony, helping 20,000 people build new lives. "I saw the message," Tae said, before Hyun could speak. "They're really doing this." "Can we negotiate?" Hyun asked. "We can pull back from the expanded territories. We can—" "They won't listen," Tae interrupted. "I've dealt with species like this before. They've already made up their minds. To them, we're nothing. Just insects they can brush away." Yuna stepped closer to the screen. "We have families down there, children, people who've spent 20 years building homes. We can't just leave everything." "We don't have a choice," Tae said quietly. "Their fleet could destroy every settlement in hours. We're not ready to fight them." Hyun felt anger rising in his chest. "So we just give up? Let them take everything we've built?" "For now, yes." Tae's voice was calm, but Hyun could see something dangerous in his eyes. "But I want to send them a message first. Patch me through to their ambassador." The Vrin ambassador appeared on screen a few minutes later. This one was different from Thelvas, smaller, with green markings on his blue skin. "What do you want, human?" the ambassador asked. "The decision is final." Tae leaned forward. "I want you to understand something. You're making a mistake. We've survived things you can't imagine. Wars that killed billions. Planets that tried to kill us with disease and starvation. We didn't give up then, and we won't forget this." The ambassador made a sound that might have been laughter. "Is that a threat? You have no military power here. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. You should be grateful we're giving you time to leave instead of simply destroying you." "I'm not threatening you," Tae said. His voice was still calm. "I'm warning you. This won't end the way you think it will." The ambassador closed the connection without another word. Yuna turned to Hyun. "What do we do?" "We evacuate," Hyun said. "Get every transport ship ready. Start with the children and elderly. Tae, how long do you need to organize things down there?" "Give me 12 hours, Tae replied. "We'll be ready." The next 3 days were chaos. Families packed what they could carry and left behind everything else. Sora, the colony's head biologist, stood in her laboratory looking at 20 years of research. Plants that had been engineered to grow in Aegis Prime's harsh soil. Animals that had been adapted to the thin atmosphere. All of it would be lost. Come on, her assistant said gently. We have to go. Sora took one last look and walked away. Minho, the chief engineer, watched as Vryn ships appeared in the sky above the colony. They didn't attack yet, but their weapons were charged and ready. Minho had helped build the water systems, the power plants, the roads. He had designed the automated farms that fed everyone. Now strangers would take it all. I'll remember this, he whispered. The last transport ships lifted off as the 72-hour deadline approached. Hyun watched from the bridge of his ship as 20,000 people left their homes. Some were crying, others were angry. Many were simply quiet, their faces blank with shock. As the human fleet moved away from the planet, the Vryn ships moved in. Hyun saw the first explosions through his view screen. They were burning the settlements, destroying everything humans had built, making sure nothing remained. Yuna stood beside him. They didn't have to do that. No, Hyun agreed. They wanted to make a point. Show us we mean nothing to them. Tae's voice came through the communication system. He was on one of the transport ships, watching the same destruction. Captain Hyun, open a channel to the Vryn fleet. One last message. Hyun did as asked. He didn't know what Tae was going to say, but he trusted the old soldier. Tae's face appeared on every Vryn ship's screen. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. When he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. You were warned. You chose to ignore us. You think this is over. You're wrong. Remember this day. Remember what you did. Because we will. Then he closed the connection. The human ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Aegis Prime behind. But as Hyun looked at the faces of his crew, he saw something that worried him. They weren't defeated. They weren't broken. They were angry. And they were already planning. Down in the transport ships, Minho was sketching designs on a datapad, weapon designs, ship modifications, things he had been thinking about for years but never built. Sora was reviewing everything she knew about Vryn biology and technology, looking for weaknesses, making lists. Tae sat alone in his quarters, staring at a wall. His face showed no emotion. But anyone who had known him during the resource wars would have recognized that look. It was the face he wore before a battle. The face of a man who had decided that mercy was no longer an option. In the depths of space, the human fleet traveled to their next destination. Behind them, Aegis Prime burned. Ahead of them, an uncertain future waited. But one thing was certain now. The Vryn had made an enemy, and they had no idea what that meant. 6 months had passed since the evacuation. The refugees from Aegis Prime had scattered across human colonies in the frontier territories. To most outsiders, it looked like the humans had accepted their loss and moved on. They were wrong. Tae sat in a small room on Station Harmony, a human outpost near the edge of explored space. Around the table sat 15 other people. They didn't look like soldiers. Some were farmers. Others were engineers or teachers. But Tae knew the truth about each of them. They had all fought in Earth's resource wars. They had all survived when survival seemed impossible. The Vryn think we're harmless, Tae said. They think we've forgotten. Let them think that. While they relax, we prepare. A woman named Jiho spoke up. She had been a farmer on Aegis Prime, but before that she had been a combat pilot. What exactly are we preparing for? We can't match their fleet in a straight fight. Their shields alone can absorb more damage than our biggest weapons can deliver. Then we don't fight straight, Tae replied. We fight the way humans have always fought when facing stronger enemies. We fight dirty. We hit them where it hurts and disappear before they can respond. Across the station, Yuna was working on something else. She had command of 12 ships now. They were cargo vessels and mining ships. Nothing that looked military. But appearances could be deceiving. Minho walked through the cargo bay of Yuna's flagship. His team had been working for months, and the results were impressive. The mining ship still looked normal from the outside, but inside, everything had changed. "Show me," Yuna said. Minho smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled since leaving Aegis Prime. "We've installed railguns along the hull. They're hidden behind panels that look like standard plating. Each gun can fire a projectile at speeds the Vryn have never seen. Their shields are designed for energy weapons and slow missiles. These will punch right through." He led her to another section. "Here, we have the drones. Thousands of them. They're small, cheap to make, and they don't need fancy sensors. Just basic cameras and simple programming. Swarm tactics. The Vryn have never faced anything like this." "Will it be enough?" Yuna asked. "Against one or two ships? Yes. Against their whole fleet?" Minho shook his head. "We need to be smart. Pick our targets. Make every shot count." In another part of the station, Sora was conducting research that the Vryn would have found very interesting if they'd known about it. She had managed to get her hands on a Vryn communication device, salvaged from a trading post. It had taken months, but she and her team had finally cracked their encryption. "I can't believe this," one of her assistants said, staring at the data. "Their entire fleet uses a single network. Every ship is connected. They coordinate everything through AI systems." Sora nodded. "They've been at peace for so long, they've forgotten the dangers of centralized systems. If we can access that network, we can feed them false information, make them see threats that don't exist, turn their ships against each other." "That's brilliant," the assistant said, "but also terrifying." "War is terrifying," Sora replied quietly. "That's something the Vryn forgot. We haven't." Hyun traveled between the scattered human settlements, quietly recruiting people to the cause. He was careful about who he approached. Not everyone agreed with what they were planning. Some humans wanted to forget about Aegis Prime and move on. Others were afraid of Vryn retaliation. But enough people remembered. Enough people were angry. 3 months into the preparation, Yuna conducted the first test. Her ship approached a remote asteroid field where pirates sometimes hid. These weren't Vryn pirates, just criminals who preyed on weak traders. Perfect for testing. "Ready the railguns," Yuna ordered. The pirate ship appeared on sensors. It was twice the size of Yuna's vessel and heavily armed. The pirates sent a message demanding cargo and supplies. Yuna didn't bother responding. "Fire!" The hidden panels slid open. 6 railguns fired simultaneously. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds, moving so fast they were invisible to the naked eye. The pirate ship's shields flickered once and then failed. The projectiles tore through the hull like paper. The ship broke apart in a silent explosion. "Target destroyed," the weapons officer reported. "Total time, 4 seconds. Yuna allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Let's go home." As the months progressed, more ships were modified. More weapons were built. Tay's network grew larger, reaching into every human settlement in the sector. They gathered intelligence on Vryn movements, trade routes, and fleet positions. Sora made another breakthrough. She discovered that Vryn ship commanders had very little training in independent combat. They relied on their AI systems for everything. Take away those systems, and they became confused and slow to react. "They've forgotten how to think for themselves," Sora explained to Tay. "Centuries of peace and technological superiority made them lazy. They assume their computers will always work. They assume their communications will always be clear. They assume their enemy will follow predictable patterns." "We won't follow any patterns," Tay said. "We'll do things they can't predict. Things their computers can't model." Minho made another innovation. He developed an EMP device based on captured Vryn technology. It was crude compared to what the Vryn could build, but it didn't need to be elegant. It just needed to work. "One of these can shut down a Vryn ship's systems for about 30 seconds, Minho explained to Hyun. 30 seconds doesn't sound like much, but in combat, it's an eternity. We can fire, hit them with the EMP, and be gone before they recover. Hyun looked at the device. How many can you make? With our current resources? Maybe 50. But if we can capture more Vryn technology, I can make hundreds. The plan began to take shape. They would start small, hit soft targets, learn and adapt, build their strength. And when the time was right, they would strike at the heart of Vryn power. But Tae knew they needed one more thing. They needed to give the Vryn a chance to back down. Not because he wanted peace. That ship had sailed when they burned Aegis Prime. But because when the war came, when the galaxy looked at what happened, Tae wanted everyone to know that humans had tried to be reasonable. He recorded a message and sent it through official channels to High Arbiter Thelvas. The message was simple and direct. This is Tae, former leader of the Aegis Prime colony. 6 months ago, you forced us from our homes. You destroyed everything we built. You did this because you believed we were weak and unimportant. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. Return Aegis Prime to human control. Pay compensation for what was destroyed. Do this, and we'll call it even. Refuse, and you'll learn what humanity is really capable of. This is your only warning. The message reached Thelvas 3 days later. He watched it with several of his advisors. When it ended, one of them laughed. The human thinks he can threaten us. With what? Their primitive weapons. Their slow ships. Thelvas didn't laugh. Something about the human's calm voice bothered him. But he pushed the feeling aside. Ignore it. They're trying to save face. Let them have their empty threats. The message was never answered. Back on Station Harmony, Tae received confirmation that his message had been delivered and ignored. He had expected nothing less. He turned to the people gathered around him, Hyun, Yuna, Minho, Sora, and a dozen others. They had their chance, Tae said. Now we do this our way. Hyun, take your ships and start scouting Vryn trade routes. Look for weaknesses. Yuna, finish the weapon modifications. Sora, I need you to finalize the network infiltration. Minho, prepare the drones and EMPs for deployment. He paused and looked at each of them. Once we start this, there's no going back. The Vryn will come after us with everything they have. Some of us won't survive, but we'll make them remember. We'll make them regret the day they decided humans didn't matter. Everyone nodded. No one looked afraid. They looked ready. In the following weeks, human ships began moving into position. They traveled slowly, carefully, pretending to be innocent traders and explorers. The Vryn paid them no attention. Why would they? Humans were harmless. That was their first mistake. It wouldn't be their last. The Vryn logistics convoy traveled through space like it had done 100 times before. 5 large cargo ships carrying supplies, protected by 2 military escorts. The route was safe, well within Vryn-controlled territory. The crews were relaxed, talking and joking on their communication channels. They never saw the attack coming. Yuna's ships emerged from behind a dead moon, moving fast. The railguns fired before the Vryn could even register the threat. The first escort ship's shields collapsed under the impact. The second barrage tore through its hull. Air and debris exploded into space. The second escort tried to turn and fight, but Minho's drones were already launching. Thousands of small machines swarmed toward the Vryn ship like angry insects. The point defense systems fired, destroying dozens of drones. But there were too many. They latched onto the hull and detonated. Small explosions rippled across the ship's surface. Systems failed. The shields went down. Yuna's flagship fired again. The escort ship broke in half. The cargo ships tried to run. They were slow and unarmed. Yuna let 4 of them go, but the 5th ship received a different treatment. An EMP device activated, shutting down all its systems. A boarding team moved in quickly. Secure the ship, Yuna ordered. Take everything useful. We have 10 minutes before Vryn reinforcements arrive. Her crew worked fast. They grabbed computer systems, weapons, and supplies. Minho personally removed several pieces of advanced technology from the engine room. When they were done, they planted explosives and left. The cargo ship exploded behind them as Yuna's fleet jumped away. The entire attack had lasted less than 15 minutes. 3 days later, it happened again. Another convoy disappeared. This time, the Vryn sent scouts to investigate. They found nothing but wreckage and unanswered questions. No distress calls had been sent. No warnings. The attackers had appeared and vanished like ghosts. High Arbiter Thelvas called an emergency meeting with his military commanders. "How is this possible? These are humans. They have no advanced technology. Their weapons are centuries behind ours." A commander named Veltok spoke carefully. "The evidence suggests they're using hit-and-run tactics. They strike fast and retreat before we can respond. Their weapons appear to be kinetic railguns, which our shields are not optimized against." "Then optimize them," Thelvas demanded. "It will take time to modify the entire fleet, and there's another problem." Veltok displayed tactical data on the main screen. "The humans are targeting our logistics ships. They're not trying to fight our military head-on. They're bleeding us. Each attack costs us supplies and equipment," another commander added. "They're also taking our technology. The boarding parties strip everything useful before destroying the ships. They're learning from us." Thelvas felt a cold sensation in his chest. "Send the Third Fleet. Find these pirates and destroy them." The Third Fleet was the Vryn's pride. 20 warships with the latest technology and the best crews. They moved into the region where the attacks had occurred, searching for the human ships. Hyun watched them come. His scout ships had been tracking the Third Fleet since it left port. He sent the information to Yuna, along with a suggested location for the battle. "The Kalos Nebula," Hyun said. "Dense gas, lots of radiation. It will mess up their sensors." Yuna studied the data. "And ours?" "We don't rely on fancy sensors," Hyun reminded her. "Basic visual tracking, simple radar, things that work even in bad conditions." Yuna smiled. "Just like the old days on Earth. When you couldn't trust your instruments, you trusted your eyes." The Third Fleet entered the Kalos Nebula 3 days later. Their sensors immediately started giving false readings. The gas clouds interfered with their scanning systems. The radiation disrupted their communications. "This is the last known location of the human ships," Veltok announced. He commanded the Third Fleet from his flagship. "Spread out. Search pattern Delta. Stay in communication range." But communication range was severely limited in the nebula. The ships spread out, each one essentially alone in the dark clouds. That's when Yuna struck. Her ships had been hiding in the densest part of the nebula, waiting. They had positioned themselves perfectly. When the Vryn ships separated, the humans attacked. The first Vryn ship died without firing a shot. Railgun rounds came from 3 directions at once. The shields held for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing. The ship was torn apart. The second ship managed to send a distress call, but the nebula's interference garbled the message. By the time Veltok understood what was happening, 3 more ships were gone. "All ships, form up on my position," Veltok ordered. But the nebula made that impossible. The Vryn ships couldn't see each other clearly. Their navigation systems were confused by the radiation. They moved slowly, carefully, afraid of colliding with each other. The humans had no such fear. They knew where every Vryn ship was. Sora's team had hacked into the Vryn's fleet coordination network weeks ago. Now they fed false sensor data to the enemy ships. The Vryn saw threats that didn't exist. They saw friendly ships as hostile contacts. 2 Vryn ships fired on each other in the confusion. Both were damaged before they realized their mistake. Yuna's fleet moved through the nebula like hunters, striking and vanishing. Minho's drones proved even more effective in the chaos. The Vryn point defense systems couldn't track targets properly in the gas clouds. The drones swarmed over ships, detonating and causing massive damage. The battle lasted 19 minutes. When it was over, 14 of the Third Fleet's 20 ships were destroyed. The survivors fled, their systems damaged and their crews traumatized. Veltok made it back to Vryn space with his flagship and 5 other ships. He reported directly to Thelvas, his face showing shock and disbelief. "It wasn't a battle," Veltok said quietly. "It was a slaughter. They knew where we were at all times. They knew our movements before we made them. It was like fighting blind while they could see perfectly." Thelvas felt fear for the first time in his long career. "How is this possible? They're humans." "They're survivors," Veltok replied. "They've fought wars we can't imagine. Wars where losing meant extinction. They know how to fight when everything is against them. We don't." The news of the Third Fleet's defeat spread quickly through the Vryn collective. The other 3 species that made up the alliance began asking difficult questions. Why were they fighting humans over one planet? Was it worth losing ships and lives? Sora's intelligence division intercepted these communications and shared them with Tai. He read through the messages with satisfaction. "They're starting to doubt," Tai said to Hyun. "Good. Keep the pressure on. Hit their trade routes. Make them afraid to travel. Make every ship loss hurt." Over the next month, human raiders struck 12 more times. They attacked mining operations. They destroyed supply depots. They captured cargo ships and took everything useful. The Vryn military tried to respond, but the humans were always one step ahead. The Vryn economy began to feel the strain. Trade slowed as merchants refused to travel dangerous routes. Mining operations closed down. The cost of defending against human attacks was enormous. 3 of the 4 Vryn species sent delegates to Thelvas. They demanded a negotiated settlement. "End this conflict," they said. "Give the humans their planet back. It's not worth this." But Thelvas refused. "We cannot show weakness. If we back down, every species in the galaxy will think the Vryn collective is weak. We must respond with overwhelming force." In a secret meeting, Thelvas authorized the use of the Stellar Lance. It was a massive space station equipped with a weapon capable of destroying planets. The Vryn had built it generations ago as a deterrent, but it had never been used in combat. "We will target a human civilian station," Thelvas said. "Nova Station. It has 12,000 inhabitants. When we destroy it, the humans will understand the cost of defying us. They will surrender." His advisors were shocked. "That's 12,000 civilians, families, children. The galactic community will condemn us." "The galactic community respects strength," Thelvas replied coldly. "Once the humans surrender, everyone will forget about this." The orders were sent. The Stellar Lance began charging its main weapon. The target was Nova Station, a civilian hub in human territory. The humans there had no idea what was coming. But Sora's intelligence team caught the communications. They decrypted the orders and sent them immediately to Tai. Tai read the message 3 times, making sure he understood correctly. Then he contacted Hyun and Yuna. "They're going to kill 12,000 civilians," Tai said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning with anger. "We have 30 minutes before the weapon fires." "We can't evacuate everyone in 30 minutes, Hyun said. "No," Tai agreed. "But we can stop them from firing. Where is the Stellar Lance?" Sora pulled up the coordinates. "Deep in Vryn space, protected by their first fleet, 25 of their best warships." Yuna looked at the numbers. "We have 17 ships available. We'll be outnumbered and outgunned. Most of us won't make it out." "I know," Tai said quietly. "But if we don't try..." 12,000 people die, including families from Aegis Prime, people we swore to protect. Hyun stood up straight. "Then we go. Send the order. All ships converge on the Stellar Lance. Maximum speed." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly on top of the Stellar Lance's position. The Vryn First Fleet was caught by surprise. They had expected attacks on convoys and mining operations. They never thought the humans would be crazy enough to attack the most heavily defended position in Vryn space. The battle began immediately, and it was brutal beyond anything either side had experienced before. The human ships came in fast and angry. They didn't try to be clever or tactical. There was no time for that. The Stellar Lance was charging, and in 28 minutes, it would fire on Nova Station. 28 minutes to save 12,000 lives. Yuna's flagship led the attack. Behind her, 16 other ships followed. They were miners, cargo vessels, and modified transports. Against them stood the Vryn First Fleet, 25 warships designed for combat, with shields and weapons far superior to anything humanity had. All ships, attack pattern Omega, Yuna ordered. Ramming speed, don't stop for anything. The Vryn commander couldn't believe what he was seeing. The humans were flying straight at his fleet with no evasive maneuvers. It was suicide. But then he understood. They weren't trying to survive. They were trying to break through. All weapons! Fire at will! The Vryn commander ordered. Space lit up with energy weapons and missiles. The first human ship exploded as multiple beams hit it simultaneously. The second ship lost its engines and started spinning out of control, but the others kept coming. Yuna's ship took hit after hit. The shields failed. Armor plating melted under the energy weapons. Alarms screamed warnings. Her crew held their positions, firing every weapon they had. "Launch the drones!" Yuna shouted over the noise. Thousands of small drones poured out of every human ship. The Vryn point defense systems couldn't stop them all. The drones swarmed over the warships, detonating against hulls and shields. They were small, but there were so many of them. Death by 1,000 cuts. A human cargo ship, its engines destroyed, used its last thrusters to crash directly into a Vryn warship. Both vessels exploded in a fireball that lit up the dark space. "Timer?" Yuna asked. 23 minutes until the lance fires," her weapons officer replied. Blood ran down his face from a head wound, but he stayed at his station. "We need to go faster," Yuna said. She looked at the tactical display. 5 human ships were already gone. The rest were badly damaged, but they had created a gap in the Vryn formation. "All remaining ships, form up on me. We're going through." 8 human ships broke through the Vryn line. Behind them, 3 more were destroyed trying to follow. The Vryn First Fleet turned to pursue, but Hyun's scout ships had been waiting for this moment. They appeared from the side, firing missiles and railgun rounds. It wasn't enough to destroy the big warships, but it was enough to slow them down. The Stellar Lance loomed ahead. It was massive, more station than weapon, with energy collectors that stretched for kilometers. At its heart was the main cannon, currently glowing with building power. Minho's voice came over the communication channel. He was piloting a small bomber, one of 3 that had been hiding in the shadow of a nearby asteroid. "I see the target. The charging chamber is exposed. If I can get a nuclear payload inside, it should trigger a chain reaction." "The shields are still up," Yuna warned. "You'll never get through." "Watch me," Minho replied. His bomber accelerated. Behind him, the other 2 bombers followed. The Stellar Lance's defense systems activated, firing at the approaching threats. The first bomber was destroyed instantly. The second lasted a few seconds longer before exploding. Minho's bomber twisted and turned, avoiding the defensive fire. His shields failed. His engines were hit and started to burn, but he was close now, so close. "This is for Aegis Prime," Minho said quietly. He armed the nuclear device and pushed his failing engines to maximum. Yuna watched on her screen. "Minho, no! Pull out! We'll find another way!" "There is no other way," Minho replied, "and there's no time. Tell everyone I'm sorry I won't be there for the victory party." His bomber disappeared into the Stellar Lance's charging chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small flash of light, then a larger one, Then the entire weapons station erupted in a massive explosion that could be seen from 100,000 kilometers away. The shockwave hit the remaining human ships, throwing them like toys. Yuna's flagship spun out of control. She gripped her command chair as the artificial gravity failed, and everything not secured went flying. When the spinning finally stopped, she pulled herself back to her station. "Status report." "We're alive," the weapons officer said, sounding surprised. "Engines are damaged but functional. The Lance is gone, completely destroyed." Yuna looked at the view screen. Where the stellar Lance had been, there was now only debris and fire. The Vryn First Fleet had also been caught by the explosion. At least half of their ships were damaged or destroyed. "Nova Station?" Yuna asked. "Safe," the communications officer confirmed. They never knew how close they came. But the victory felt hollow. Yuna looked at the casualty reports coming in. 5 ships completely destroyed. 3 more so damaged they could barely move. And Minho was gone. The engineer who had designed their weapons. The man who had turned civilian ships into warships. Dead because the Vryn had tried to murder civilians. "Count the cost later," Yuna told herself. "Right now, get everyone home." The surviving human ships regrouped and jumped away before the Vryn could organize a pursuit. They limped back to Station Harmony, beaten and bloody but successful. Tay was waiting when they arrived. He saw the damaged ships and the empty spaces where others should have been. His face showed no emotion, but everyone who knew him could see the anger burning in his eyes. "They tried to kill civilians," Tay said. 12,000 people who had nothing to do with this war. Children, families. They were willing to commit genocide to make a point. Hyan stood beside him, also watching the damaged ship's dock. "What do we do now?" "We make sure everyone knows what they tried to do," Tay replied. "Sora, do you have the Vryn communications? The orders to fire on Nova Station?" Sora nodded. "Every word, every transmission. It's all recorded. Send it to every news agency in the galaxy, every government, every species. Let them all see what the Vryn Collective is willing to do." The recordings went out within hours. High Arbiter Thelvas ordering the destruction of a civilian station, Vryn officers discussing the targeting of families and children, the cold calculation of how many deaths would be needed to force human surrender. The reaction was immediate and devastating for the Vryn. Trade partners cut their agreements. Diplomatic relations were suspended. 3 of the 4 species in the Vryn Collective demanded an emergency council meeting. They wanted to know who had authorized such actions and why they hadn't been consulted. On Vryn homeworld, protests erupted. Not all Vryn supported the war, and many were horrified by what their leaders had tried to do. The attempted genocide of civilians went against everything the Vryn claimed to stand for. The galactic community turned against them. Species that had been neutral now condemned the Vryn openly. Some even offered support to humanity, sending supplies and intelligence. High Arbiter Thelvas found himself isolated. His advisors abandoned him. His military commanders questioned his orders. The collective was fracturing. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Thelvas called a meeting of the Vryn High Council. "This is human propaganda. They're making us look like monsters." "You ordered the destruction of a civilian station," one council member said. "That's not propaganda. That's fact. We have your own words on record." "It was a military decision," Thelvas insisted. "We needed to show strength." "You showed cruelty," another council member replied. "And now the galaxy sees us as murderers. Trade is collapsing. Our allies are leaving us. All because you refuse to negotiate with humans over one planet." "We cannot negotiate from weakness," Thelvas said. "We're already weak," the council member shouted. "We've lost 30 ships. Our economy is suffering. Our reputation is destroyed. All for what? Pride?" The meeting ended with no resolution, but the damage was done. The Vryn Collective was falling apart. Back on Station Harmony, Tay gathered everyone for a final meeting. The survivors of the battle looked tired but determined. They had paid a terrible price, but they had saved Nova Station, and they had exposed the Vryn for what they truly were. "We're not done yet," Tay said. "The Vryn are wounded, but they're still dangerous. We need to finish this, not with more battles if we can avoid it, but by hitting them where it really hurts." "Their homeworld," Hyun said quietly. Tay nodded. "Not to destroy it. We're not like them. We don't murder civilians. But we need to prove that we can reach them anywhere, that their defenses mean nothing, that if they want war, we can bring it to their doorstep." Sora pulled up tactical data. "Their orbital defenses are extensive. Satellite weapons, shield generators, fighter squadrons. It would take a massive assault to break through." "Or a small, precise one," Tay replied. "We don't need to invade. We just need to shut down their defenses for long enough to prove we could if we wanted to. Show them they're not safe anymore." Yuna looked at the plan Tay was proposing. It was dangerous. Possibly suicidal. But after what the Vryn had tried to do, after Minho's sacrifice and all the others, she knew it had to be done. "When do we leave?" she asked. 3 days, Tay said. "That gives us time to repair the ships and say goodbye to the people we might not see again. This is it, the final push. After this, either the Vryn surrender or we die trying." No one argued. They all knew what was at stake. The time for half measures was over. The Vryn homeworld hung in space like a blue and green jewel. Billions of people lived on its surface, going about their daily lives. They knew about the war, of course. News traveled fast, but most of them felt safe. Their world was protected by the most advanced defense system in the sector. Nothing could threaten them here. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Hyun's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 12 ships, all that remained of the human strike force. They were battered and repaired with spare parts. They looked like they could barely fly. But appearances were deceiving. "Sora, are you in their network?" Hyun asked. On a ship 3,000 kilometers away, Sora stared at her screens. Lines of code scrolled past. The Vryn defense network was fighting her intrusion, but weeks of preparation had given her the tools she needed. "I'm in," Sora confirmed. "Their AI is trying to kick me out, but I'm feeding it false data faster than it can process. The defense satellites think we're a merchant fleet. The shield generators are reading normal status even though I'm starting the shutdown sequence." "How long until they realize what's happening?" Yuna asked from her flagship. 10 minutes, Sora replied. "Maybe less if they're smart." "Then we move fast," Tay said. He was on Hyun's ship, watching everything unfold. "All ships, attack formation. Target the orbital defenses. Remember, we hit the military targets only, no civilian structures." The human fleet accelerated toward the planet. The Vryn defense satellites should have opened fire immediately. Instead, they did nothing, their targeting systems confused by the false data Sora was feeding them. By the time the Vryn Defense Command realized something was wrong, it was too late. The human ships were already among the orbital stations, firing railguns and launching drones. Defense satellites exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Shield generator stations went dark as EMPs shut down their systems. On the planet's surface, alarms began to sound. People looked up at the sky and saw their defenses burning. Fear spread quickly. How had enemies gotten so close? Where were the warnings? What was happening? Vryn fighter craft launched from their bases, scrambling to respond. But without the coordination network, they flew in confused formations. The pilots weren't trained for independent combat. They had always relied on AI guidance. Human ships danced through the orbital space, destroying defensive positions with practiced precision. They had learned from every battle. Every mistake had been studied and corrected. The Vryn had never learned because they had never needed to. Now, they were paying the price. In 30 minutes, the human fleet had shut down 70% of the planet's orbital defenses. Yuna's ship took position directly above the capital city. From here, her weapons could target government buildings, power plants, communication centers. She could cripple the entire planet's infrastructure. But she didn't fire. Instead, Hyun opened a communication channel. His message was broadcast on every frequency, sent to every device on the planet. Billions of Vryn heard his voice at the same time. People of the Vryn homeworld, this is Captain Hyun of the human fleet. Your orbital defenses are down. We could destroy your military bases. We could target your government centers. We could do to you what you tried to do to Nova Station, kill thousands of civilians to make a point. He paused, letting that sink in. But we won't, because we're not like your leaders. We don't murder civilians. We don't commit genocide. 6 months ago, you forced us from our homes on Aegis Prime. You burned everything we built. You laughed at our warnings. Then you tried to kill 12,000 of our people, including children, just to scare us into submission. Another pause. On the planet below, people watched their screens in horror and shame. We could have responded with the same cruelty. We chose not to. But make no mistake, we can reach you anywhere. Your defenses mean nothing. Your fleets can't stop us. If you want this war to continue, we will bring it to every Vryn world. We will make you afraid to sleep at night. We will make you understand what it means to face an enemy that has nothing left to lose. Tay stepped forward and took over the communication. His voice was calm, but everyone listening could hear the iron beneath it. But we're also willing to end this. Return Aegis Prime to human control. Pay fair compensation for what was destroyed. Agree to never attack human colonies again. Do this, and we leave in peace. Refuse, and we continue this war until one of us is destroyed. You have 24 hours to decide. The communication ended. The human fleet held position in orbit, weapons ready but not firing. They waited. On the surface, chaos erupted. The government was flooded with messages from terrified citizens demanding an end to the war. Business leaders pointed out that the economy was collapsing. Military commanders admitted they couldn't defend against an enemy that fought like humans did. High Arbiter Thelvas was removed from power by the High Council. They couldn't afford his pride anymore. A new leadership took over, one focused on survival rather than dominance. 18 hours after Hyun's message, a response came. The new Vryn leadership appeared on screen. They looked tired and defeated. We accept your terms. Aegis Prime will be returned to human control. Compensation will be provided. We will sign a non-aggression treaty. Please, no more war. Tay nodded slowly. Smart choice. We'll send representatives to finalize the details. And one more thing. High Arbiter Thelvas will stand trial before the Galactic Council for attempting to commit genocide. This isn't negotiable. The Vryn agreed. They had no choice. The human fleet stayed in orbit for 3 more days, while treaties were signed and verified. Then slowly, they withdrew. As they left, Sora released control of the defense network. The Vryn systems came back online, but everyone knew the truth now. Their defenses could be beaten. They weren't invincible anymore. The journey back to human space felt different. The ships were still damaged, people were still grieving their losses, but they had won. Against impossible odds, using inferior technology and smaller numbers, they had forced one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations to back down. When they reached Station Harmony, thousands of people were waiting. Refugees from Aegis Prime, families of the fallen, people who had supported the resistance with supplies and shelter. They cheered as the fleet docked. Yuna stepped off her ship and was immediately surrounded by people thanking her. She smiled and nodded, but inside, she felt empty. Victory had come at such a high price. Minho was gone. 47 ships had been lost. Thousands of people had died. Was it worth it? She asked Hyun later, as they stood watching the celebration. Hyun was quiet for a moment. Yes, because if we hadn't fought, the Vryn would have kept taking. From us, from others. Someone had to show them there are consequences, that you can't just push people around because you're stronger. Tay joined them. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The war had aged him. We won because we had to, because we remembered what it means to survive. The Vryn forgot. Centuries of peace made them soft, made them think war was something they could turn on and off like a machine. "What happens now?" Yuna asked. "Now we go home," Tay replied. "Back to Aegis Prime. We rebuild, and we remember." 3 months later, the first transport ships landed on Aegis Prime. The settlements were gone, burned by the Vryn. But the land was still there. The sky was still blue. It was home. Sora stood in what had been her laboratory. Nothing remained except scorched foundations. But she could rebuild. They all could. That's what humans did best. Rebuild after disaster. Families began arriving. They brought seeds and tools and hope. Children played in fields that had been battlegrounds. Old people planted trees that would provide shade for future generations. A memorial was built near the site of the first settlement. Every name of every person who had died in the war was carved into black stone. Minho's name was at the top, along with the crews of the ships that had been destroyed. The inscription at the base read, "They forced us to leave. We warned them. Never again." Hyun stood before the memorial on the day it was dedicated. He wore his uniform, medals and ribbons showing his service. Behind him stood what remained of the human fleet, 12 battered ships that had taken on an empire and won. "We didn't want this war," Hyun said to the assembled crowd. "We wanted peace. We wanted to build our lives and raise our families. But when forced to choose between submission and survival, we chose survival. We chose to fight. And we won because we remembered something the Vryn forgot, that the will to survive is stronger than any weapon." The crowd was silent. Some people were crying. Others stood straight and proud. They were survivors, all of them. Yuna addressed the crowd next. "The galaxy sees us differently now. Before, we were just another species struggling to find our place. Now they know what we're capable of. Some fear us, others respect us, but all of them understand one thing. Humanity doesn't give up. Push us, and we push back. Attack us, and we fight with everything we have." Over the following years, Aegis Prime grew again. The settlements were rebuilt, bigger and stronger than before. The farms produced more food. The cities expanded. Children who had been evacuated grew up and had children of their own. The Vryn Collective never recovered its former power. The war had broken something in them. 3 of the 4 species left the alliance, forming their own governments. The Vryn themselves became more cautious, more humble. They never again tried to push humanity around. Other species learned the lesson too. When humans said no, you listened. When they set boundaries, you respected them, because everyone had seen what happened when you didn't. Tay retired from public life. He bought a small farm on Aegis Prime and lived quietly. Sometimes young officers would visit him, asking for advice about strategy or leadership. He would pour them tea and talk about the war, always ending with the same words. "We fought because we had to. We won because we remembered what survival costs. Never forget that. And never let your children forget it either. Peace is precious, but freedom is priceless. Be willing to defend both." Hyun became an admiral, overseeing human fleet operations across the frontier. Under his command, humanity expanded carefully but confidently. New colonies were established, trade routes were protected, and every ship carried weapons that could punch above their weight, just in case. Sora continued her research, now with proper funding and respect from the galactic scientific community. Her work on alien technology helped humanity advance rapidly. But she never forgot why she had learned to hack Vryn systems. Sometimes, survival required you to learn your enemy's secrets. Years later, a new alien species made contact with humanity. They were powerful and advanced. One of their diplomats made the mistake of speaking dismissively about human capabilities. The human ambassador smiled politely and said, "Perhaps you should speak with the Vrin. They can tell you what happens when you underestimate us." The alien diplomat did his research. The war was well documented, the tactics, the sacrifices, the final strike on the Vrin homeworld. After reading everything, the alien approached negotiations with much more respect. On Aegis Prime, life went on. Children played without knowing the names of the battles their parents had fought. Young people complained about normal problems, not evacuation orders and burning cities. That was how it should be. But in the veteran halls where the old soldiers gathered, they remembered. They told stories about the war, about Minho's sacrifice, about the battle at the Stellar Lance, about the day human ships appeared over the Vrin homeworld and proved that determination could overcome superior technology. And they taught the younger generation one simple truth. Humanity had survived everything the universe threw at them. Hostile planets, resource wars, alien aggression. They survived because they adapted, because they fought when necessary, and because they never, ever gave up. The Vrin had forced them to leave, thinking humans were weak and insignificant. They had been warned, and they had learned the hard way what humanity was truly capable of. That lesson would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.